the Infuso is a good YouTuber. He makes good Gotham content. I was always right about him. He's a hack! My least favorite YouTuber! He's screwing with the wrong series! He's a blight on this entire platform! I want that bald-bearded bastard cancelled! I want him hacked by fraudulent sponsors! I want Infuso!
Now, I've upset a lot of people before when I stated I didn't love the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy. And then I upset people again when I said I didn't really love the 1989 Tim Burton Batman movie. So now that I've been completely pushed out of that fandom, I figure now is a good time to start disappointing the Spider-Man crowd. Because I don't really love the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy.
What are you talking about?
I know, but hold on. For you true believers out there that are skeptical, just give me a chance.
They love me.
First and foremost, and this one's gonna sting a little bit, but it's time to just rip that Spider-Man band-aid right off right quick. I didn't like Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. I know, but there's more to the statement, hear me out. Peter Parker is typically a nerdy, awkward teenage outcast who's the butt of almost every joke. He's brilliant, but not socially. He's a nerdy remnant of a bygone era. The guy just radiates Leave It to Beaver energy. And I truly think that Tobey Maguire captures this half of the character perfectly. When you're watching him get bullied, it's believable because this is the type of guy who would be bullied back in high school. And middle school, elementary school, and probably pre-K. Tobey Maguire really truly personifies Peter Parker here. And he does so with a certain authenticity that I don't think gets applauded quite enough. It would be so easy for the dweeby Parker to come off as a whiny, annoying little brat, a nuisance to those in the character's life, and moviegoers watching alike. But instead, Tobey really delivers, and he makes you want to root for this walking wedgie. Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker has a lot of heart. This half of the character, he got down 110%, no question. And I would even argue that this half of the character is the more important half of the character in these movies. These films put a lot of emphasis and focus on Peter Parker, almost having Spider-Man somewhat take a back seat. And I'm pretty sure the character appears more without the costume than he does with it. In the Sam Raimi films, Peter takes center stage. So these movies needed someone who could be a great Peter Parker, and Tobey Maguire is just that, a great Peter Parker. But as for the other half of the character, the side of the character that these movies are named after, I don't know. I just never feel like he fully got it. This isn't something that I've just come up with over the years. This was a problem I had with these movies back in 2002, when I was a child. When Peter becomes Spider-Man, he's supposed to gain this sense of self-worth, an unmatched confidence that he's never had before. He develops a more witty, quippy attitude and sense of humor. Spider-Man is one of the most fun heroes out there. He's able to entertain the audience and annoy the competition. He's able to save the day and crack jokes while doing so. We don't really get that in these movies. To me, Spider-Man just feels like Peter Parker, but now in cosplay. And granted, yes, on paper, I guess that's what he is, but he just never feels like Spider-Man. He's still the same old lame dork you want to stuff into a locker. Except now we have the added benefit of seeing him in spandex. I will say though, I think that Tobey gets other parts of the Spider-Man character correct. The character is more heroic in these movies than I think he is in any other. Spider-Man's moral compass is front and center, and he seems legitimate in his pursuit of what's right. But he's severely lacking the cool factor that is ever so present in Spider-Man. Unless you count these as dope one-liners.
Are you in, or are you out?
It's you who's out, Gobby. Out of your mind.
I don't want to hurt you. Leave now.
I guess you haven't heard. I'm the sheriff around these parts. See you, chump.
Pizza time.
The truth of the matter is that being Spider-Man doesn't really change Peter all that much. It doesn't do a whole lot to evolve him. It doesn't develop his character, it just provides new obstacles for him. The closest thing to development the character gets is in the third movie when they decide to make him a prideful, narcissistic asshole. Which also is not Spider-Man, so what are we doing here? I could go on and on about how Spider-Man 3 completely defiles the character and turns him into an absolutely unlikable lead. I mean, this movie buries both the man and the spider. But for as bad as this movie is, and for the completely wrong direction that they took Peter Parker in, I still think the first serious misstep was back in Spider-Man 2. I completely understand having Peter drop the costume. He's so consumed with being Spider-Man that he's forgotten how to be man. Seeing all the stress that comes with being a hero and none of the reward, he gives it all up, hoping to better his own life. That makes sense to me. That's human. And Spider-Man, quite frankly, is quite possibly the most human hero out there. Web blood included. However, I think the movie takes it a step too far by having Peter witness a crime, and not a victimless one at that, and instead of intervening or trying to help in any form or fashion, he just runs off. Come on, Pete. You're Spider-Man, not the Lightbringer. Fair enough when he sees cops pursuing a criminal, that's fine. But the guy literally leaves someone to be mugged, beaten, and hell, potentially killed for all he knows. He has absolutely no excuse for this. Because he didn't need to be Spider-Man in that instance to help somebody. He could have just done it himself, glasses and all. But he chose to turn his back on someone in need. And that completely goes against everything Spider-Man is about. But you know who really gets it worse in these movies? Mary Jane. Mary Jane is the definition of a damsel in distress in these movies. She got kidnapped in the first one, she got kidnapped in the second one, guess what happens in the third one? That's right, she gets kidnapped. Her only place in this story is to be the girl that Spider-Man saves. I think the series did right by the character in the first movie. I mean, granted, it's still a significant detour from who she is in the comics, but, you know, you can't have it all. But they still did a really good job of making a likable lead. And then they did everything in their power to break down what they built up. In these movies, she's petty, blaming Peter for all of her misfortunes and being kind of mean-spirited to him. She comes off as completely resentful, and they haven't even made it to the honeymoon yet. Despite claiming to have always known Peter was Spider-Man, she continually chastises him for not being there for her. I mean, I get that she feels let down, but, like, come on, the dude's saving the city! Even after she finds out that he is for sure Spider-Man, she's now jealous of all the attention he gets, and becomes pouty when she sees him save the day. And that's just not the MJ that I know. MJ in the comics is supportive, as is Peter for her and her dreams as well. They have such a great relationship in the comics, so to see it brought to the big screen as if they were originally scheduled for an appearance on the Jerry Springer Show is a little disheartening. I take a lot of issue with the way Mary Jane is presented in these movies. But more so over, I take a lot of issue with her relationship with Peter in these movies. They have such a sincere energy between them that most people disregard just how terrible their actual lines of dialogue were.
You're taller than you look.
I hunch.
Don't.
These roles went to the right people. They made a cute couple. Two people that you really wanted to root for. Until the movies eventually make you want to root against them in every one of their obstacles. They're two people who are trying to get over what life throws at them, but you kinda don't want them to after a while. You want them to go separate paths and stay as far away from each other as possible. Their incredible chemistry seems to dissipate from movie to movie, finally ending up being a hollow shell of something that was once sweet. In the first movie, she's the lifelong neighbor girl that Peter's pined for his whole life. The unattainable girl next door who he's physically close to, but so emotionally distant from. That movie ends with her professing her love for him, only for him to turn her down because it's the right thing to do, I guess. Sure, whatever. In the next movie, despite being denied, she still lightly pursues Peter, and she wants him to show interest in her. Then when he finally does, she's over it. And then later she wants him again, but now he's over it. Yes, I'm simplifying things here. Please stop writing the comment, I can hear you now. Finally, they do end up together. And then in the next one, they're almost immediately ripped back apart due to a nefarious scheme. We don't ever really get comfortable with these characters as an item. We're just constantly shown the chase as opposed to the destination. On top of that, in today's day and age where people rewatch older media and label characters like Ted Mosby and Ross Geller as toxic, how are there still people who praise the Peter Parker-Mary Jane romance from the Sam Raimi films? Look, I'm not for canceling fictional people, but they are literally the most toxic couple I have ever seen. In Spider-Man 1, Mary Jane just stands by and watches her boyfriend Flash continually bully and even attempt to assault Peter. Then she gives him the stink eye and judges him for defending himself.
MJ, about today, at school with Flash.
You really freaked us out.
I'm sorry.
Peter and MJ are later having a moment, and just as it looks like these two lovebirds are gonna chirp, Flash arrives just in the nick of time to web block. Her and Flash break up, and she immediately rebounds with Harry, Peter's best friend. Despite Harry knowing how Peter feels about MJ, and MJ probably also knowing how he feels because, how could you not? Even when Harry and MJ are dating, Peter and her are constantly flirting and having these moments. On top of that, she also has a very obvious crush and attraction to Spider-Man, who she does not know is Peter. Actually, come to think of it, she cheats on Harry with Spider-Man, when she was supposed to meet him for a date nonetheless. Her and Harry eventually break up, go figure, and she makes a pass at Peter. Peter declines, and we're off to the next movie. MJ is still trying to make Peter fall into her web. No pun intended. But he's either denying his love for her to her face, or otherwise breaking promises and continuously letting her down. She randomly drops a bombshell on Peter that she's seeing someone else, his boss's son, but she says this after she lets him know that she still in fact has feelings for him. Peter continues to let her down, so she figures, oh well, better marry this dude because Peter's not paying me any attention. Despite this, Peter later tells her that he's changed and asks her for another chance. Despite the fact, to his knowledge, she's trying to move on, and she's someone else's fiancé. Then, Mary Jane says, fuck it, I'll give him another chance, even though I'm picking out wedding dresses and setting a date. But Peter's like, nah, I can't do it, I'm Spider-Man again. He saves her, they share a moment, and then Mary Jane gleefully leaves the guy whose only place in the story was to be cucked at the altar. She then runs to Peter in her wedding dress and tells him he doesn't have a choice, they're a couple now. Next movie starts off, and Peter's openly kissing other women in public under the guise of doing it as Spider-Man. It's fine, it's all for publicity. Except he's never okayed that with his girlfriend. And the woman that he kisses is actually his classmate, who clearly has a bit of a crush on him. Peter attempts to propose, but she leaves upset before he can. Mary Jane spends time with Harry, who has plot-convenient amnesia, her ex-boyfriend and Peter's best friend, and also worst enemy, long story, and kisses him. Then Harry loses his temporary amnesia, threatens to kill Peter if Mary Jane doesn't leave him, even though it kind of seemed like she was kind of into him to begin with, so I don't think it would have... I don't think you really needed to go that route. So they break up, even though her boyfriend is Spider-Man, and she could just go over there and be like, hey, Harry's evil again, he wants to kill you, but also he's trying to get me to break up with you. You want to do something about this? But no, she figures... yeah, I guess you're right. I have to break up with him. I have no other choice. What else can I do? So they break up. Peter, of course, cries, like he does in all of these movies.
What are you talking about?
But then he's mean, evil, emo Peter, because he's got a symbiote that also works as a drug of some kind. He then dates his classmate Gwen Stacy, who he kissed in front of Mary Jane already, and then just starts stalking his ex-girlfriend like it's a thing to do, all while parading Gwen Stacy around like she's some kind of trophy. He comes to her new job to humiliate her, and make her feel bad by seeing him with Gwen Stacy. And then for good measure, he even knocks her on her ass after beating down her co-workers. Despite this, the two try to meet up and work things out again. But Mary Jane is of course kidnapped. Pete and now good guy Harry come to save the day. In saving his friends' lives, Harry loses his own. And now that there's no more suitors for Mary Jane, Peter and MJ dance in celebration. That last dance they have, I think we're supposed to feel at ease and happy that these two characters have made it work. You know, forgiveness is the theme of that Spider-Man movie. But by the time the credits roll in Spider-Man 3, they've already been so awful to each other that I don't think anyone really cares to see them together again. This is not a happy ending for anybody. Not for Peter, not for MJ, not for Sam Raimi, not for me having watched this. It's a happy end for nobody. Look at their facial reactions during this scene. They don't even look happy, they look traumatized. These two are absolutely awful to each other. And if we're going to start calling out fictional characters now, I say let's start here. Peter and MJ had a terrible relationship in the Spider-Man movies. And don't even get me started with Harry. This series really spent 2 whole movies crafting Harry's origin story and ended his arc with 0 payoff. You went through all that trouble of making the guy a heel, and for what? An abrupt last-minute face turn that eventually costs him his life? You would think with the amount of time and attention these movies focused on Harry, that the goal would be to make him the third movie's big bad. It only makes sense. But apparently, it'd make too much sense. Instead, he gets negated to a backseat villain role and is overshadowed by Anakin Skywalker's worst nightmare and Black Carnage. What's truly sad is that we saw Harry be dismissed by the only person who he'd ever won approval from. His own father. He had his father die without ever making him proud or gaining his acceptance. So he tries to walk in his father's shoes, but he fails at doing so. We watched as Harry found out that the man he believes murdered his father was his own best friend, who is also the guy that started dating the girl that he loved. That's a pretty big build for 2 movies. And how does that sad story end? He hits his head, gets temporary amnesia, gets better at the worst time, pretends to date MJ to get back at Peter. Peter throws a bomb at his face. He apologizes and says MJ needs him and all is well. Oh, and then he dies. That's it. That's the arc. Thanks for coming. A lot of people hold these movies to such a high standard that they compare any other Spider-Man related concept to this, and they act as if this is the one true interpretation of their favorite hero. Thing is, these movies alter their source material quite a bit. Let's get the obvious one out of the way. Spider-Man's web shooters are not natural. They're not a mutation. They're not one of the superpowers he got when he was bitten by a radioactive arachnid. Traditionally, those are built by Peter in an effort to help him stop criminals while he's doing his day-to-day crime-fighting activities.
When that spider bit you, did it give you power to make webs too?
No, I did that myself.
While there are plenty of villains that are worthy of a redemption arc, I gotta say, Doc Ock is a really strange choice. This isn't typically his depiction in the comics. And in the ones that do redeem the character, it just doesn't come off as natural to me. Doc Ock is a straight-up villain. He's not an anti-hero, he's not somebody to feel bad for, he's a straight-up baddie. I didn't mean for that to sound as sexual as it came off, so we're just gonna awkwardly move past that. But I will say Alfred Molina really pulls it off. He does an incredible job in the role, and I have zero problem with the way he performed Otto Octavius. He was great, and the movie does a really good job of establishing him as less of a bad guy and more of a sad guy. It works, it's good. I'm just saying, not Doc Ock from the comics. Great as its own thing, just not the Doc Ock I've read. And also unlike his comic book counterpart is
Edward Brock Jr.
Now, I don't really hate this performance as much as many other people do. I truly don't believe it's bad. Topher Grace did a good job for what he was given. It is not bad on Topher Grace's part at all, but it was bad on Sam Raimi's. I get what they're trying to do here. They were trying to create a mirror image of Peter, showing this is what he could become. And they succeeded at that, because I could just as easily see Eric Foreman over here playing the titular role, and he'd probably be every bit as good as Tobey was. So yes, in that sense, it worked. It definitely is very Peter Parker-esque. However, I don't think that Venom is the right character to do this with. Eddie Brock isn't some evil version of Peter Parker. He's the antithesis of Peter Parker. Peter's a nerd, Eddie's a jock. Peter's small and frail, Eddie's big and brolic. Peter likes science, Eddie can't do math. It's that simple. In Spider-Man 3, this isn't Venom. This is just Spider-Man versus his own symbiote. And that's really all there is to it.
How would you compare your version of Eddie Brock Venom with that of the comic book version?
I thought maybe I was the wrong person to play the role when I first got cast, because in the comic book, he's even bigger than me. But then Sam told me that he wanted me to be kind of like evil doppelganger to Peter.
To Peter, right.
It's okay if this is your favorite Spider-Man. It's a lot of people's. But that doesn't make it the most accurate Spider-Man. And that's okay too. I'm really just saying that this isn't what a lot of people seem to think it is. To be fair, the new Spider-Man movies also do a lot to change things from their source material as well. Probably due to the fact that there were so many other elements that were used in the last 2 Spider-Man series. And don't worry, I'm gonna get to them too. Another weird thing for me is that there are a lot of relationships in these movies that happen almost entirely off-screen. Dr. Connors is good friends with Dr. Octavius, and they share all of 0 scenes together. A passing reference is all you get.
Your paper on fusion is still overdue.
I know, I'm planning to write it on Dr. Otto Octavius.
Octavius is a friend of mine.
Well, it won't take much of your time.
Parker, now I remember you. You're Connor's student. Tells me you're brilliant.
That's all?
J. Jonah Jameson only acknowledges his own son in passing to other characters and scenes.
An American hero. My son, the astronaut.
The two are never on screen at the same time. Another thing that really bugs me about these movies, also no pun intended, does nobody talk to each other in these movies at all? Like, do people not ever speak to each other when the cameras aren't rolling? Let me explain. After Harry finds out that Peter is Spider-Man, these friends turn foes, and Mary Jane then asks Peter,
"What's with you guys, anyway?"
It's complicated.
First off, it's weird that Peter would never give MJ a breakdown of his friendship with somebody who is one of both of their closest friends. But can't Mary Jane put two and two together? She knows Peter is Spider-Man. What, did Harry not mention to her that he thinks Spider-Man killed his father? How? How is that possible? We're supposed to think all three of them were so close, but Harry doesn't shut the f*** up about it. It's like the only thing he talks about is his hatred for Spider-Man. How in all the years since his dad died did this not come up around Mary Jane? Peter never tells Harry that he's with MJ after he gets amnesia. Like, why would that not come up? Why was this something you were hiding? You were both in front of him. You would think that somebody might say something? Unless we're just recreating and reversing the situation from the first film for the sake of, I don't know, having a plot that rhymes.
It's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
These movies are very much a product of their time. The CGI special effects are very out of date, and even at the time, I can remember thinking that they were a little bit clunky. This time period's idea of a realistic special effect was basically cutting from a real actor to a PlayStation 2 sprite. Seriously, they look ripped straight out of the Spider-Man games based on the movie. You know the games. The Spider-Man, the movie, the game games. By the way, great name. Amazing. Spectacular, even. The special effects are all kinds of awful. Actually, come to think of it, the Spider-Man the movie game on PS2 had better graphics than this shit. But I'm not going to hold that against them because these movies were made in the early 2000s and they were really doing the best that they could do. I'm just saying, they stick out. Still, props for Doc Ock's Ock arms. Those effects still hold up. Really good job. But that's also probably because those were practical effects, as opposed to impractical effects. Like any other high school movie made in the early to mid 2000s, absolutely nobody looks their age. I'm sitting here thinking, why do you have these 34-year-old men playing 17-year-olds? There's a scene in the first movie with a teacher, and literally everyone in the class looks older than him. Harry tells Peter that his father would like to adopt him, and I'm sitting here wondering why a 47-year-old man would want to adopt a 27-year-old man, unless the meaning of the word adopt means something else, in which case, I don't want to know about it. I really gotta give it to the 90s and 2000 movies. They did this all the time, and it flew over so many of our young viewing audience heads. A 28-year-old woman playing a 16-year-old cheerleader? Sure, why not? Have a 37-year-old woman play a dead 16-year-old ghost in a school for wizards with a name that sounds like an STD? Sure, why not? Hell, back in the 70s, they had a 33-year-old woman play a 17-year-old senior, and nobody batted an eye. One thing I don't hear talked about when talking about these movies is just how exposition-y the dialogue can come off. It's not a constant problem, but it is a continual one. Characters will stop speaking like characters to almost break down the backstory of the story, or explain a problem they have that we don't otherwise see.
When the plant's senior electrician is laid off after 35 years, what else would you call it? I am on my ass.
Mr. Osborn, always a pleasure to have our board of directors pay us a little visit.
May, I'm 68 years old. I'm too old for computers, and besides, I have a family to provide for.
I love you, and Peter loves you.
I'm Spider-Man. Now you know why I can't be with you. If my enemies found out about you, if you got hurt, I could never forgive myself.
One of my favorites is when Peter literally stops in his own tracks so he could talk to himself and mimic how a potential conversation with Mary Jane would go when he's all of 6 feet away from her.
I don't know if you realize this, but we've been neighbors since I was 6.
One of my favorite things about these movies is that they're filled to the brim with Spider-Man characters. I love it because it really sets up the universe of Spider-Man. Sure, it's not like something was done with all of these characters, but you know, it's nice to know that they exist in a universe where potentially something at some point in time could happen. In the year 2021, we finally have a Batman 89 comic book series. So all I'm saying is, the door's open for continuation, and man oh man, this series has some opportunities. The series is so beloved and it has so many heroes and villains hiding in plain sight that I think it would be a shame not to work on it. That's just my take. But in hindsight, maybe there was a bit too much of that. Because often these movies would rush to reference a character prior to introducing them, and completely retconning the reference that was made. In the first movie, Peter makes mention of him being fired from his job, mentioning that he was fired by Dr. Connors.
I was late for work and Dr. Connors fired me.
You were late again?
Dr. Connors, of course, being the brilliant scientist from the comics, who, in trying to recreate his missing appendage, instead turns himself into a giant fucking lizard. The character's brought up in the first movie, but then he's later introduced in the second. Not as Peter's former boss, but instead as his new teacher. Eddie Brock, Venom himself, is brought up in the first Spider-Man movie, where he's referenced as working at the Daily Bugle and trying to get a picture of Spider-Man.
Problem is, we don't have a decent picture. Eddie's been on it for weeks.
But then the character is reintroduced in Spider-Man 3, and now he's trying to get a job working for the Daily Bugle. Once again, trying to take pictures of Spider-Man. This is apparently because another actor was cast in the role in the first movie, but was cut out of the final product before being replaced entirely. Doctor Strange is also mentioned in Spider-Man 2 as well.
What are we gonna call this guy?
Doctor Strange.
That's pretty good. But it's taken.
So be on the lookout for Raimi Strange. I didn't mean for that to sound as sexual as it came off, so we're just gonna awkwardly move past that. The movies also have the tendency to throw logic entirely out the window, but considering that we're talking about a man who shoots webs out his wrist due to a spider bite, maybe it wasn't really there to begin with. I don't know. One of the things that always irked me was, why does Doc Ock follow Harry's orders? Doc Ock could just squash him like a bug right then and there, and then steal the tritium he so desperately needs. But he doesn't. Instead, he decides to be his personal hitman? The man was a scientist not even 40 minutes ago, but now he's gonna go ahead and put a hit out on somebody. Yeah, sure, okay. Another thing that confuses me about these movies is, Harry loved his father so much that he hated Spider-Man with that same passion. And he's taken back and perplexed when he learns that his best friend, Peter Parker, is Spider-Man. But where oh where is that energy when he learns that his father was the Green Goblin? Why would he look to avenge him knowing damn well that he's a criminal? Knowing what he did to his best friend's elderly aunt, and the woman he clearly still has some feelings for. Why would you do it? Why would you take up that mantle? For the way that Harry was depicted in these movies, his arc could have and probably should have ended the second that he realized who his father was. After learning of his nefarious ways, his grudge with Peter should have just been stifled. Like, I'm not saying make them best friends again, but you would think that he'd be somewhat understanding of the situation, considering that his father was a malicious, violent, murderous psychopath. You would think. These movies also seem a bit repetitive. For one, we get the same Spider-Man running in front of the American flag bit each and every movie. On top of that, we also see him enter a burning building on multiple occasions. We watch him have the same "do you love me" conversation with MJ over and over and over again. Both Spider-Man 1 and 2's main villain is a brilliant scientist who Peter knows personally through Harry Osborn. Both are intellectual mentors that have a fondness for Peter, and both went mad due to their own experiments going awry. Granted, in execution, things are done considerably different, but still, these movies are a testament to sequels just doing the same thing over. It's not quite hitting Hangover 2 levels of repetition, but it's not as far off as you may think. A lot of people will look to Spider-Man 3 as the absolute low point of these movies. And rightfully so. It is. No question. It's the worst. It's actually so bad that I have to make an entirely separate video talking about all that's wrong with it. I'm not doing it all here. But all I'll say for now is that the movie has always talked about ruining the series because it was too goofy. A lot of Spider-Man fans act like this movie was going from Tim Burton's Batman to Joel Schumacher's Batman and Robin. A complete tonal shift that doesn't make sense for the canon of the franchise. But in my estimate, this was much more like going from Batman Forever to Batman and Robin, because it was already pretty goofy to begin with. But also, yeah, they definitely did go a bit overboard later on.
It's a little disjointed. It's bold in terms of jerking people around, but I may have gone too far in a few places.
I think this trilogy is one of the rare times where the extended cuts are actually vastly inferior to the theatrical cuts. These scenes that they added in do more to take away from the story than add to it. They're unnecessary additions that mess with the pacing of the movie, and the extension and addition of scenes seem to completely conflict with the overall tone. If you have the choice, trust me, you're going to want to go for the theatrical cuts. The sole scene worth watching is seeing J. Jonah Jameson hop around his office in a Spidey suit while playing pretend. It's a fun scene overall, but it's not something that works all that great for the canon. Again, just a bit too goofy. I have a whole bunch of questions regarding these movies too. Like, why was Robbie always side-eyeing Peter and making mention of Spider-Man while making eye contact with him? Did he know Peter was Spider-Man? And if so, how? How did he figure it out? There's no indication how he did. I mean, other than the obvious that everybody in these movies finds out that Peter is Spider-Man. Also, in addition to me asking how Robbie knows Peter is Spider-Man, I also have to ask, how does nobody else? How did no one figure out he was Spider-Man after this? Or this? Or this? And I'm supposed to believe these kids on the train didn't tell anyone in school they saw Spider-Man's real face? I mean, sure, you're not going to bring the 5th graders into a lineup to pick him out, but still. And also, if this is Peter's aunt and uncle, just how old were his parents? Someone make it make sense! Now, don't get it twisted. I don't hate these movies. On some level, I actually really enjoy them. The over-the-top sinister performance of Willem Dafoe, the surprisingly earnest and human portrayal of Doc Ock, the endless Bruce Campbell cameos, watching Aunt May and Uncle Ben be plucked straight out of the pages of a comic book and slapped onto the big screen. There are so many elements of these movies that I intend to further focus on in future videos. When making this video, I found myself laughing at and along with these movies. Whether they're good, whether they're bad, they're always entertaining. I don't hate these movies. I truly don't. I just don't like them as much as a lot of other people do. That's not even to say that they're badly made or poorly put together. These videos are just solely made to talk about some of the things I disliked from the films I talk about. And a lot of the things that I listed kinda take away from my viewing experience. So no, I don't hate the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. I just wish that they did a couple things different.
Enough said.
Sam Raimi's set of Spider-Man movies is often referred to as the greatest on-screen Spider-Man series. And sure, they didn't exactly stick the landing, but as a big man once sang, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Now before I start singing the praises of this over 20-year-old trilogy, let me first state that in the past on this channel, it's been an unsung hero. And I've been the one doing the not singing. Previously, I made a video talking about all the faults and flaws of Spider-Man 1, 2, and especially 3. And for some fans, I pretty much spoiled my good name.
Remember when V made that dumbass Spider-Man video that ain't nobody like?
Yeah, I remember that shit.
Who is V Infuso? He's a criminal. That's who he is. A clickbaiter. A hack. What's he doing on my personal feed?
Some kind of freaky Lou or something wackadoo.
He stinks, and I don't like him.
But I have to confess, while that video was titled Why I Didn't Like the Spider-Man Movies, a more accurate title for that video would be What I Didn't Like About the Spider-Man Movies. It's just, I don't think that they're always the most accurate adaptation like some people claim. I don't think that every evolution of these characters is perfectly paced. And like many, I don't love the last installment. But having said all that, I made that video focusing on the faults of the film, because often those are what's mostly forgotten and less talked about. Let me admit now that for whatever cons came with the franchise, there were probably at least twice as many pros. And honestly, that might even be underselling it. When No Way Home was coming out, I had a couple of my friends swing by and watch the webhead, and this is how they decided to show up.
Sorry, I'm late. Work was murder. I picked up a fruitcake.
Pizza time. Later, chump.
This wasn't entirely planned. This was something they took upon themselves to do, which I think speaks very loudly about how people feel about this franchise. These movies are a lot of people's favorite Spider-Man movies, favorite superhero movies, favorite movies. And it's not very hard to see why.
They love me.
Because even when these movies were at their worst, they still felt like an absolute labor of love, minus the Venom scenes. A touching tribute to the source material that created it. While it didn't follow the books it was based on to a T, It definitely perfectly adapted the spirit of the source, the characterization of the character, being a down-on-his-luck, good-hearted nerd given great power and learning to deal with it responsibly, showcasing the plight that comes with these powers. The Spider-Man films felt like a beautiful blend between the original comics run and the very specific mind of Sam Raimi. What Tim Burton and Michael Keaton did for Batman, Sam Raimi and Tobey Maguire did for Spider-Man. Like I said in my last video, Tobey's Spider-Man never really felt like Spider-Man to me, but he did always feel like Peter Parker. He's a geeky outcast shunned by the world that he protects, someone who's highly intelligent but falls short socially. He's great at school, but sometimes sucks at life. He's a good person who makes some bad mistakes along the way. This is a Peter Parker that you want to root for. You want to see him right his wrongs. You want to see him pick himself up after he falls. You want to see him succeed where he once failed. In these movies, he's constantly getting dunked on. His best friend dates the girl he's been in love with since childhood. They break up, she realizes she loves him, but he realizes the danger that he'd be putting her in, so he tries his best to stay away from her. He denies her time and time again, hurting the both of them. Not because he wants to, but because he feels he has to. He's forced to watch as she moves on, and is even given a front row seat. He finally puts a stop to the person terrorizing the city, only to find out that it was his mentor and his best friend's father. His buddy then blames him for his father's death, leading to his friend to turn into his foe. So he finds a new mentor. But wouldn't you know it, he also turns bad following a scientific experiment gone wrong. He loses his one father figure, tracks down his killer, only to find out that he could have prevented this from happening had he stopped him earlier. This gives him an overwhelming sense of guilt that unfortunately is kind of justified. And even after tracking this person down, he winds up finding out that he was only an accomplice. These are only some of the tragedies that befall onto this Peter Parker in these movies. And yet despite all of this, he still tries to approach every scenario with a smile. He's still trying to make things right. The movies, much like the comics themselves, seem to abide by the silent rule of if things are going good for Peter, then they're going bad for Spider-Man. And if things are going good for Spider-Man, then they're going bad for Peter Parker. You can never have it two ways, unless it's bad for both, and then you can. Which makes sense, as it's the struggles that make our heroes super, not the powers themselves. He is constantly self-sacrificing, whether that means his own life or his own happiness. This Spider-Man is selfless, maybe in part because his hero was born from an act of selfishness. And even after figuring out what it is that he stands for, he still struggles with this because he himself is an imperfect person. He wants to give it all up. He wants to lead a normal life. But even when he temporarily looks out for himself, he shortly thereafter winds up looking out for everyone else. For me personally, he didn't feel like the Mask, but he did feel like the man behind it. And I think ultimately, that's way more important. I personally believe that Spider-Man is one of the few characters where his secret identity is equally, if not more important, than his super identity. Likewise, his aunt and uncle are absolute perfection, feeling like the most genuinely good-hearted and well-meaning characters these movies have to offer, serving as Peter's moral compass. In moments of doubt and self-reflection, he looks to their guidance, both internally and externally. They are far past being the perfect parents that Peter never had, and they're wonderfully wholesome every time they're on the screen together. I mean, look at them, they're adorable. Even when Uncle Ben is no longer here, Peter still seeks him out, mentally. The Green Goblin is maybe the most psychotic that he's ever been before or since, and in my opinion will ever be again, and that's all just based on the merit that he's being played by Willem Dafoe. Do I even need to mention how J.K. Simmons completely embodied J. Jonah Jameson? The guy was so iconic in this one role that he's played it in multiple continuities, playing the character in these 3 Spider-Man movies, then reprising the role in the games of the same name, being a part of the LEGO Marvel Superheroes game, appearing on The Simpsons as a parody of the character as a poetry publisher, appearing on Robot Chicken as a parody of the character again, showing up in the Avengers cartoon, showing back up in another Avengers cartoon, coming back for the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, coming back again for a Hulk show as a vampire version of the character, not kidding, and then returning once again for the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. That's without me mentioning that he tried to worm his way into the Amazing Spider-Man series as well, and how he didn't is beyond me, but here we are. Once you hear or see this guy in the role, that's it. You can never imagine anybody else doing what he does. The thing that I feel this series doesn't get enough credit on is establishing a wider world outside of the hero and villain, including all different characters from the comics. I know this ultimately just winds up being window dressing for each story at hand, but it is some of my favorite part of these films. Recognizing the characters in the background and knowing who they might someday become. They never overdid it either. They're there, they serve their role in the story or the scene that they're in, and then we move on. But they're there, and I appreciate that. It feels night and day with what they did with the Amazing Spider-Man series. Because they kind of tried to do a similar thing where there were a bunch of characters from the comics hanging out in the background. Here's BJ Novak as Alistair Smythe. Great. But I don't think that any of those characters got to feel like the characters. And I don't think anybody cared about any of those characters. Whereas here, no matter how small your time on screen was, these characters were understood. And you could very well make a comparison to the comic book character that they're based on. I've always appreciated this, and I think this is well-warranted fan service before fan service was even a thing that comic book movies tried to do. Do I even need to mention the Bruce Campbell cameos? I don't think I do. I will, but I don't think I have to. Because Sam Raimi was the one directing these movies, Bruce Campbell was this trilogy's Stan Lee. The man is constantly stealing the spotlight for each and every scene he's in, despite the fact that he's never anyone of note and was a different NPC each and every movie. Now, I know what everybody's already typing up in the comments. Oh, he's supposed to be Mysterio. But he wasn't. It never happened. I wish it did. Would have loved to see what he did with it. But it didn't happen. The movies literally recreated iconic imagery and reimagined moments from the comics, but made adjustments when adapting to make it better fit in with their movie universe. And personally, I kind of really love that, because that's also not something that was often done by movies. Usually they would just take the IP, maybe you'd get one scene of something that might be vaguely familiar to the comics, and that only exists because you need to set up a story. But everything else was just original. And while these stories were original, they were original stories that were inspired by pre-existing media. Green Goblin at the top of the bridge with the love of Peter's life? Where have I seen that before? Even as a kid when watching this, it had me pointing at the screen like I was Leonardo DiCaprio. But at the same time, while this trilogy used tried and true tropes that reflected the character's early origins, being that Sam Raimi was the one at the helm, this series takes risks and goes its own route, giving it its own distinct identity, unique to itself, sharing the DNA of its predecessor, but not being a carbon copy of such. It gets understated just how different this Spider-Man series was. We're talking about a set of films that gave Spidey built-in organic web shooters. A decision I hated when I was younger, but later on have almost come to love. For this specific story, not in general. If this was the norm, I probably would hate it. But this was a smart decision because it ties more of his abilities into his plight. I don't think there should be any argument that this Spider-Man was the most Spider-Man-like. Like, an actual man spider? Like a human spider?
A human spider, that's it? That's the best you got?
Yeah.
Oh, that sucks.
But I think that added more to the feeling of him being an outcast, to him being different, to him standing out. When major changes were made to characters, it was usually for the benefit of the story that was being told. Like making Norman Osborn a tortured soul, tormented by the darker half of his persona brought on by stress and experimental science, kind of made Norman himself act as just another victim of the Green Goblin. Whereas typically the Green Goblin was mostly just greedy and psychotic. This makes Norman a more sympathetic character. It made the Goblin more of a force of nature, something otherworldly almost. And it made for a unique origin to the bizarre Peter Parker-Harry Osborn feud. Dr. Octopus winding up being more doctor than octopus, I think worked wonders. Okay, you know what? That one didn't work. I'm willing to admit it. That one did not work.
Dr. Octagonopus!
It's a terrible joke.
The Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies turned the evil scientist into a much more three-dimensional character. A good man corrupted by heartbreak and experimental science, because apparently if you want to change the world, you're only going to change yourself. Kind of a theme here. I would say that giving Doc Ock a heart actually worked better than making the Green Goblin a sympathetic character, because you feel it more with Alfred Molina's performance. He truly does feel completely taken over. And he was such a great guy in his introduction that you're kind of rooting for the character to go back to his roots. Likewise, Sandman's given a redemption arc, showing that he really was just a good man trying to do what was best for his sick daughter, who gets corrupted by a science experiment gone wrong. Who could have saw that one coming?
Who would have thought? Not me.
Thank you, Spider-Man.
At least he's not a scientist. Now, I could be wrong, because I haven't read a lot of Spider-Man comics with Sandman in. Probably upward of 20, a little bit less of 30, if I'm being honest. Yeah, I've also seen him in a bunch of TV shows as well over the years, so with my limited knowledge of that character, admitted limited knowledge of that character, I'm gonna make a bold statement, and feel free to tell me I'm wrong in the comments. This, to me, feels like the most fleshed out version of this villain. His arc is very clearly the strongest aspect of the movie that he's a part of. The good depiction of these bad guys made these once two-dimensional characters feel three-dimensional to me, taking them from caricatures to characters, adding depth to them and further differentiating their versions of the characters from any other that's come before, and many that will come after. The movies also knew when to combine characters. Because there's such a vast amount of Spider-Man characters in the comics, things needed to be condensed, and in some cases, combined. So the movies made the brilliant decision to make Mary Jane and Gwen Stacy one character, taking the two greatest loves of Peter's lives and kinda meshing them together to create an amalgamation of such, before inevitably introducing a Gwen Stacy after the fact, who did not work for the movies because she was already working in the movies under a different name. But for the most part, I felt combining the aspects of the loves of Peter's lives kinda made their relationship play out like a highlight reel of both comic couples, giving the pairing the major moments of both story arcs, and leaving out some of the more unfortunate aspects, which I will do you a favor and not talk about here. The point that I'm making here is that when changes were made to a character, they felt purposeful. And they served to either better the character in general, or better the story surrounding the character in the movie. And I'm going to give you my most controversial opinion here. Everybody's going to turn off the video right now. If you were here with me this whole time, this might be the part where I lose you, but hear me out. I think that there's actually merit to what was done with Venom in these movies.
Move this man!
Now wait a second, hear me out. I am not saying that Topher Grace was a good Eddie Brock. I am not saying that 70s show was the best Venom. What I am saying is that he was never really asked to be. The vision of the villain went in a completely different direction, instead choosing to make the character into a bizarro Peter Parker. This is our lead led down the wrong path. This is who Peter almost became when he had the black suit. This is the darkest timeline. And I think given that description, he fit the bill pretty well. The two actors bring a very similar energy to their roles. They even deliver some of their lines alike as well. They have a very similar nature to them, and they both act comedically cool in the most camptastic of ways. I could very easily see these two actors switching places. Topher Grace wasn't tasked with being Venom. He was tasked with being evil Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. And I think he knocked it out of the park. It doesn't make for an ideal Venom by any means. This is not that character. But it does make for an interesting new threat. For me, there's merit to this. Although, again, I think it worked narratively, but As a fan of Venom, yeah, this ain't it. I'm not sitting here trying to convince you otherwise. This is definitely not what people were expecting, and it's not what people were hoping for. I have no problem finding positives in what most people consider an overwhelming negative. However, Harry is the new Goblin. Well, that's where I have a hard time finding any positives at all. I think in the end, it was nice to see these two former friends fight side by side for the first and last time, reuniting their relationship in an effort to save a shared flame. It made these movies in some way feel full circle. But that fact is independent of this character's arc. I really wish they would have went for like the more obvious Hobgoblin route with the character. I know that Harry has not been the Hobgoblin, but I know that most Spider-Man fans deem that to be a mistake, and he probably should have been from the beginning. I know I do. And if they did wind up doing that, I think it would have been marginally better. But I just think James Franco as a supervillain wasn't going to be good for anybody. I also think that Harry is a roller coaster in these films. He starts off as an average, somewhat ordinary kid who just so happens to resemble James Dean. He's not incredibly smart or gifted or popular. He's just Harry. Everyone just seems to think that he's bland. He's nobody's first choice. He dates the girl of his dreams, but he's kind of a rebound following her breakup with Flash. He dates MJ only to hear her fawn over Spider-Man and watch her connect with Peter. Even his own father, the one person he sought the approval of, seems to favor his best friend. I mean, come on guys, you're giving the guy a complex. He never lives up to his father's aspirations of him when he's alive, so he desperately tries to fill his shoes and follow in his footsteps in death, waiting for a pat on the back that will never come. Eventually he attempts to avenge his father, but history unfortunately winds up repeating itself. He fights with Spider-Man, uses Mary Jane as a pawn, and then ultimately winds up being pierced by his own glider, spending his last moments speaking to Spider-Man. If you haven't heard already the Why I Didn't Like Spider-Man video, I would highly suggest checking it out. I go into more detail as to why his character arc really doesn't work, and is probably the weakest element of all of these movies. But he did make for a character that you can care for and be compassionate about. Even with him being a bad guy, you understand how he got there. I feel like a lot of the time in comic book movies, writers don't know how to make the heroes and villains just as interesting. They either go too much in one way or another. They always make one significantly more important or more interesting than the other. For example, Batman wasn't the star of The Dark Knight, the Joker was. Though there were 3 Iron Man movies, the villains are never memorable. Iron Man was always the star of Iron Man. But I don't think the same could be said for these movies. They expertly balance the plight of the hero and the tragedy of the villains. Maybe a lot of that had to do with the fact that a lot of these villains had integral roles both in the lives of Spider-Man and Peter Parker, meaning we saw their backstories play out in a way that felt natural to the developing narrative, although in hindsight, pretty plot convenient. You gotta give credit to them, they just made it work. These movies were brilliantly cast with actors who made you believe in the characters they were playing, no matter how outlandish they were. As a matter of fact, sometimes the more over the top, the better. There were a lot of cogs in the machine making these movies work, including, but not limited to, music that perfectly accompanied every scene it was in. Memorable tracks that are forever intertwined with the scenes that they're a part of. Creative and well-choreographed clashes between the hero and his many villains with unique locations and premises for each showdown. And writing that, quite frankly, will never get enough credit. The series has a certain amount of, oh boy, dare I say, poetry? And not the lazy, copy-paste, repurpose, reuse George Lucas way of doing poetry, but stories and story beats that feel full circle, that feel fully realized. The dialogue is a little cheesy, but boldly blunt, and in a way, kind of brilliant. And when it's not, it's just blatantly brilliant. The characters' words echo throughout each film, as their spoken words either come to fruition later on, or repeat themselves in an interesting manner. Let me give you a couple examples before I go. When Peter finds out MJ is working as a coffeehouse waitress, she makes him promise,
Don't tell Harry.
Don't tell Harry.
And then in the climax of the movie, when Peter finds Harry's father and his mentor is the Green Goblin, the very last thing he asks Peter is,
Don't tell Harry.
Or how about this disingenuous plea from Norman?
Thank God for you.
Then later at his funeral, Harry notes that Peter is the only family he has left, and he finishes his statement with,
Thank God for you, Peter.
There's plenty of moments of dialogue being repeated by characters. Sometimes they're literally winks and nods to the audience, like inside jokes that only Sam Raimi and his cast and crew would get.
My back! Oh, my back!
There are a lot of other examples in these movies as well. But I think my personal favorite is when Peter presses Eric Foreman and says,
You want forgiveness? Get religion.
And then the next time we see the character, he's at a church, even though he's just come to the big man's house and asking him to put hit out on Peter Parker. He's God, not the Godfather. Or when Doc Ock, realizing the gravity of his situation, is looking off into the distance to say,
And these monstrous things should be at the bottom of the river, along with me.
And how does that movie end again? There is just so much to love about these characters, and I probably haven't even covered half of it. They have a certain charm to them that has never really been duplicated, despite the varying success the sequel series have seen. And I truly believe that even when these films were at their lowest, they were still very entertaining. So, with all of that being said, if you like this video, and would maybe want to see me tackle these movies individually, you know, a video on Spider-Man 1, a video on Spider-Man 2, a video on Spider-Man 3, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
I am vengeance. I am the night. And that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.